Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to listen to us today. My name is Kevin Settee, and this is my brother Craig Settee, and we're both from Canada. We're First Nations, Indigenous, but the nation that we come from is the Anishinaabe Nation. And yeah, here's our presentation, Consumer Involvement in Kidney Disease Research. What is it, and how to do it well?
So just a note, I do have more than one shirt. You might see I'm wearing the same shirt in my picture. But yeah, as Kevin said, we're Anishinaabe and we're also Cree. So those are two our maternal and our paternal sides of our family. And yeah, our family comes from a few communities in kind of like south and central Manitoba, kind of around Lake Winnipeg it's called. So communities on our mom's side are Dauphin River and Little Saskatchewan First Nations, and on our dad's side it's Matheson Island and Fisher River Cree Nation. So that's a little bit about us and where we come from. So we're here just to talk a little bit about CanSolve CKD Network. So I think before we move into what is on here is that how did we become involved in CanSolve? And to start that off, it was Kevin and my mom who were initially involved with CanSolve as patient partners, and it was their suggestion to have more donors involved in the network. And so I kind of came in, I think, in about the second year of CanSolve's kind of grant period. And so I've involved for about a year, and then an opportunity came up to apply for a core team, and so now I work for the network as the Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Council as the coordinator. So our network involves kidney patients, researchers, healthcare providers, policymakers, and caregivers. Our mom is also involved in the network with us, and so she's kind of our caregiver. And my partner is also here, Amanda. She's sitting in the crowd, and she's also caregiver for me during the transplant process. And then just some of the other chronic disease networks that are in Canada and that we kind of work alongside and do some partnerships with. So we do have a couple of people from Diabetes Action Canada that are involved in the IPERC, Indigenous Peoples Council, that we're a part of.
And so the CanSolve is a Canada-wide project, a Canada-wide network with 18 projects. And this is just a little diagram. Indigenous Peoples Engagement Research Council and the Patient Council are really at the center of everything that happens nationally. We've been involved right since the beginning, and we're going to be involved right until the end. We're going to talk a little bit about the Patient Council and the Indigenous Peoples Engagement Research Council.
So I have a colleague named Leah Getchell, and she helps to lead the Patient Council, and she was initially involved as well as a patient partner. And so there are members of IPERC that are also a part of Patient Council, and this group is mostly kidney patients, caregivers, Indigenous people, and the rest of the words that we have up there. But it's a pretty diverse group and come from all across Canada, so it's sometimes a little time-consuming to kind of coordinate everybody who, if they're living on the East Coast and they're meeting with people on the West Coast, it's like a 5-6 hour time difference. So it's keeping that in mind as well with having patients engaged is being mindful of the time and the commitment that it takes to be involved in a pan-Canadian network.
The other thing as well is that there's a lot of people who, they're on hemo, they're on peritoneal dialysis. There's people who have transplants. There's people who've had transplants and they've had them fail. So there's a wide-ranging perspectives and people who've had kidney disease. The other thing as well is we don't have representation from the north as much as we would like to, from like Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and the Yukon, which is one of the places that we want to expand and include patients because they're often left out of Indigenous health research. So that's something that we're working on. This is the Indigenous Peoples Engagement Research Council. There's over 25 members across the country, Indigenous patients, caregivers, researchers, and community leaders. This picture here is actually of one of our elders and some of the patient partners, some physicians, some Indigenous physicians from Manitoba. And the guy in the middle, his name's Dan Thomas, and he's been a very great help for us and is involved with a few of the projects, and he does sweats, and he actually named one of the initiatives that we have, which is Wabashke Bijigo Skanj. We'll talk about that probably a little bit later. Yeah.
So the title of the talk was consumer involvement, but in Canada we use patient partner, patient engagement more. So that was we kind of took the leadership from the group that asked us to come and present. So that was the name that was put on there, and we decided just to leave it since we're here in Australia. But in terms of patient engagement, patient partners are involved in designing, executing, and interpreting, communicating research. So I think that an example of that is Kevin and I being here, presenting on the posters and speaking to our story. But even before that, there's patient partners who are involved on all of the projects. So there's the 18 projects, and there's a group of about 5 or 6, I think, that have been a part of CanSolve right since its inception, and they're still involved, and they are. One of the ladies sitting in the picture there is Kathy Woods, and she's one of the co-chairs of IPERC Council, and she's been there right from the beginning. So I think it's good that we're able to have patients living with CKD, donors and caregivers able to connect and share with clinicians, physicians, and research process on the outcomes that affect us. So I think that's an important point.
Patient partners are involved in setting the research priorities. So before CanSolve even started, there was discussions that led up and which kind of set the stage for the projects. So there's 18 research projects across 3 main themes: early diagnosis, better treatments, and innovative care. One of the ones that I'm really interested in is the early diagnosis and treatment. And so there's a kidney check project in Manitoba and British Columbia. And so basically what the idea is to go to 10 communities in each province to screen the communities, and a lot of remote and rural communities. And so patients have been involved right from the beginning, from picking the communities and talking to the physicians, and how are we going to engage with the community, how are we going to engage with people who have language barriers and stuff like that. So that's just one example.
And so this is just a map of where some of the project leads are, also where co-investigators reside, and also patient partners. So you can see there's kind of spread out across Canada. So Ontario kind of has I think the highest population for a province in Canada. So you see a lot of dots and a lot of images on that one, and we're the one that's right in the middle there. So that's Manitoba. Yeah, so that's just a map of Canada where we are. Research projects transforming care. I think for this one here, the one that speaks to me specifically is improving living donor rates and experience. I know that's a big part of our network, and we had a gathering that we went to in Vancouver. It was called Kidney Gala, and there was also parents there of of a young man named Logan Boulet, and they call it the Logan Boulet effect. And it was his death was part of a bus crash from a hockey player, like a hockey team, and there's been thousands of people sign up for being organ donors and tissue donors as a result of that. So there's that part. And the other research projects here, delaying progression with new treatments, identifying, treating early CKD.
The other work that patient partners are involved in is patient engagement training, so building capacity through patient-oriented research training, foundations in patient-oriented research training workshops. So all the physicians and researchers that come through CanSolve have to go through a certain amount of training in order to work on the projects. 90 network members have received the foundational training, and we're developing additional curriculum focused on core activities. So for me, this is a big thing as someone who's been researched, and I've had IgA nephropathy since I was 10. Been on peritoneal dialysis for a couple years, and then had the transplant. And as an Indigenous person, it's really important for us to be a part of training physicians, training researchers, and teaching them how to engage with us. And it can be difficult sometimes because people like to be on their phones and people don't like to pay attention. And that's one thing that we always talk about too, is like, we're always sharing our perspectives, we're always sharing what we're going through, what we're doing. And it's not very often that we get to hear from the physicians and the researchers as to why they love doing what they're doing. Why are you a nephrologist? Why are you a researcher? We know it's not all about the money. There's got to be some sort of reason that you're in this job, in this line of work, whether it's a personal reason or family or something like that. So yeah, a big part of it for us is hearing about the physicians and why they do what they do.
Yeah, so just to carry on to that point, I think is patient engagement impact. I think that's a big part. Is the second point especially is ensuring accessible language and concepts. I know in some of the curriculum that we're developing, that's some of the suggestions that we make constantly is to have more of a lay summary as well as what the project is, what the research is about, because it's pretty difficult to read through some of the stuff when you have to refer to a dictionary often, or have the key concepts or a glossary of terms that you're reading alongside the paper that you're reading. So that's something, I know it's part of the learning curve, and it's part of having patience with patients. So I think that's a big part of it, and those are actually some suggestions that our patient groups have made to some of our funding agencies.
Patient engagement impact on the patient participants, such as ourselves. So we have annual meetings, and sometimes they can be a week long. And for some of the patients, especially who are on hemodialysis and have to go to the hospitals for hemodialysis, it can be really fatiguing for them. And there's been times when people who are a part of CanSolve and part of the Indigenous Peoples Research Council, they've been hospitalized, and people get sick. And so these are some of the things that we've learned. Like it's not always good news. We mess up sometimes as well. There's also sometimes there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty in terms of what the expectations are and how much workload a patient should take on. Because some patients are working full-time, some people have multiple part-time jobs, and joining multiple projects can be pretty stressful. Some people take on a lot, and then some people are confused and don't really know where they could fit in or where they can help out. So that's something that we're also working on, and also the financial hardships. So people get honorariums, but it's they have to pay for it in their taxes at the end of the year anyway. So sometimes it's people are leaving work for a week and they're losing out on a couple $1,000, and they get like a $300 honorarium. So that's another thing that we're trying to figure out as well, is how to financially compensate people who are putting in a lot of hours in network.
And patient engagement survey. So there's been part of the curriculum and survey, and patient engagement is a survey that's gone out, and different patient partners have taken that. So there's many that feel strongly there's better that they are better informed about kidney research, and despite the patient engagement training, patients feel the need to be more equipped as patient partners in research. And further development of CanSolve curriculum is needed, and that's still underway. So keep your eyes open and visit our website.
Respondents felt empowered in contributing to research and valued connections with peers and partners. So, like even coming here, being at the song workshops, especially with the young kids, that had a big impact on me. To see the young kids at the table and some of them sharing. General themes for improvement, demonstrating the value of patient engagement, enhanced diversity of patient partners, more opportunities for interaction among patient partners. So those are some things that we'd like to work on, and we touched on a little bit earlier.
Just in conclusion, the complexity of research in its current environment, just, taking, even graduating university, I still feel like I'm a lifelong learner, and still a lot of educating of myself in terms of research and this, kidney research field. Just the time commitments as well, of being mindful of people's time that they're taking away from work and away from their family to be involved in the network, and then also just the sustainability aspect, just keeping patient and policy maker engagement, the funding support, and managing expectations.
This is the so this is a part of what the elders helped us figure out and bring forward into the CanSolve network. It's part of our teachings as Anishinaabe people. It's kind of adapted, looking, listening, learning, living, and loving. This is kind of a shortened version of listening, learning, and leading. So as you can see, listening to patients, caregivers, policymakers, researchers, and clinicians. Learning from the patients, learning from caregivers, learning from policymakers, researchers and clinicians, and then leading with and actually doing the work and making it happen with patients, caregivers, policymakers, researchers, and clinicians. And yeah.
And that's our presentation.
Thanks, Kevin and Craig. That was such a great presentation, and thank you for taking the time to come down to Melbourne and speak to us about your experience with patient engagement. Do we have any questions in the room? Anything online? So up next we have Kylie Paolo. Kylie is from Victoria. She's married to Shane and is mother to Blake and Zoe. Kylie is a human resources manager and Shane runs his own business. Shane, who's also watching online, I believe, was diagnosed with IgA, I knew I would get stuck saying this one,
nephropathy.
Thank you. 24 years ago, 2 years before they married. Kylie became involved with the BEAT-CKD Consumer Advisory Board late last year, not long after Shane's nephrologist started the preemptive transplant process. Thank you.